I'm Edie Lush, and I'm here at the Hub Culture Pavilion in Davos. Very pleased to be joined by Malini Mehra. Thanks very much for coming along. Chief Executive of the Center for Social Markets. So tell me why you're here in Davos.
That's right. Well, I'm here to pick up on the vibe. There's a lot of discussions taking place here, everything ranging from terrorism to climate security, and also to start putting a few pieces in place together. We've been working on climate change for a number of years now and see that that's really occupied the top first, second, third slots in a number of international fora. So we've just come away now from Cancun. We're preparing now for the next round of international climate negotiations at Durban. But people are still talking about climate in a very abstract way. They're beginning to talk and recognize the issue around water security risk because so many parts of the world are insecure in terms of their access to water, and countries like China in terms of the quality of their water. And just in the last few days, we've seen the transformation of the Arab region and North Africa in particular as a result partly of the rise in the cost of food, and how ordinary people are rebelling against that. So we've got these three different themes. We've got climate and energy, we've got water, and we've got food. So what I'm here to explore is the connection between all three of these in the context of climate change and climate constraints, and to make the argument that we actually need to be looking at these, what are increasingly being termed the few issues, food security, energy security, and water security, as an integrated set of risks that we need to be attentive to.
So in terms of what you actually see getting done as a result of Davos, I've heard sort of both arguments. I've heard people say that this is actually the year where people actually seem to be, everybody's kind of back. There's a feeling that there is some kind of sense of the gloom lifting, a bit of optimism coming through, that there are being some deals done. On the other hand, I've heard, there's a lot of talk, and then at the end of the day, it's let's do a pilot program or let's do a case study. So do you have a different perspective on that? Do you see that actually companies or countries are now making some real progress on where we're going on the foo issues, as you call them?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot happening at Davos. I mean, the kind of, the big headline issue is around the concern about macroeconomic stability or macroeconomic peril. How secure is the euro? But actually, in the ecosystem of Davos, there are so many conversations taking place. So if we look at just the kind of issues that I'm concerned with, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening. So you've got companies here who are actually talking about how they're making the transition from getting the methodology right within their company about measuring their carbon footprint to recognizing that they have to have equally robust mechanisms for measuring their water footprint. Now, not all of these are connected to food, right? These companies in terms of their exposure, but they're working in areas in countries which could, become unstable because of what's happening to food. So there's the recognition by companies, and you see that in the dialogue with Unilever in terms of how it's addressing sustainable agriculture and working much more closely with small rural farm holders. And you begin to see it by the inclusion of many more voices. So we've got, for example, the Director General of IFPRI, which is the International Food Policy Research Institute. We've got labour unions here. We've got water analysts. So we've got a real, very different mix of people who all bring parts of the solution. I went to a really interesting media lab, which was organised by MIT, which started looking at these issues. It was a preliminary investigation, but it allowed those of us with a concern to look at the technological solutions that might be in the pipeline and to make an argument that if you really want to look at these issues effectively, you don't just talk in terms of access to these issues, but what the impact is on reducing poverty. So there's a much broader global social agenda involved.
There's been a lot of discussion about China. We've had a lot of discussion about water. I spoke to somebody the other day who was saying that the growing climate crisis relating to water in China is something that nobody's really quite figured out yet. They figured it out, but they don't quite know what the impact is going to be. I wonder if you have any views on that.
Yeah, I think China is it's an amazingly exciting place to watch, for new developments. So in terms of the Chinese engagement here, a number of things. The Chinese are actually grappling and have been grappling for quite a number of years about the water agenda for them, because water is absolutely fundamental. It's fundamental to China's agrarian productivity, its food security, its rural masses. So remember, 200 million people are still, these are not just the super rich in China, but the bulk of the Chinese are still living in the agrarian west of the country. The Chinese are very concerned about water pollution. because the majority of China's rivers are amongst the most polluted in the world. The issue about pollution is actually driving people to become much more vocal publicly. So there is a very fierce public debate about water pollution and how that's having knock-on impacts on public health issues. So the Chinese have not only been looking at it, they've been trying to start setting up a policy framework around this and connect it with the broader climate agenda, because climate impacts, one of them is going to be a drier world. The Chinese are also looking at what's happening in terms of the Himalayas, because we all know there's faster glacial melt, which means you're going to have floods in the near term and drought in the long term. So they're trying to reflect some of these concerns, anxieties, but solutions in the new 5-year plan, which is going to be coming out shortly. So it's a really interesting place to watch, because the Chinese government is taking it seriously, because China's public is becoming concerned.
Malini, thanks very much for stopping by the Hub Pavilion here in Davos, and I'm Edie Lush.